Kurt Cobain had this really extensive series of journals and so on and so forth that, had lyrics, notes, commentary on his life and thoughts on various things. And one page of his journals, which have been published and republished pretty extensively over the years, is this kind of top 50 albums list. It could be maybe in some respects his 50 favorite albums at the time or whatever. Any music nerd sort of any hardcore music fan knows that these sorts of lists are always subject to change as, your taste changes and you get into other things. But, there's definitely a snapshot in time of Kurt Cobain's taste during this peak moment of his and, Nirvana's creative trajectory. And I thought it would be fun to kind of go over it here with you guys, for anybody who is uninitiated, doesn't know the list, but also sort of to revisit too, because there are a lot of cool records on there that are worth kind of talking about, bringing into maybe a more modern context and, just shouting out. And there are a few in there that even I myself am not super familiar with. So here's the list. I'm going to blow it up. And obviously it's in these three different columns. But I'm going to blow it up over here so we can kind of go over each of them one by one. And as you guys will see, there's some familiar faves in there, for me as far as, stuff I've shouted out over the years. But yeah, top 50 by Nirvana. All right, first one, Stooges' Raw Power, banger of a record. Fantastic record. Amazing rock album. One of my first classic reviews that I've ever done on the channel. I will say, a lot of the more modern remasters that are very bricked out, very compression heavy are just abusive on the ears. But when you look at some of the earlier, what I believe is supposed to be the original mix of the album that Iggy Pop did, that the label had, changed because they hated the way that it sounded. The super maxed out remasters in recent years are more true to what Iggy originally wanted the album to sound like. It's a very thick, heavy sounding record. It's so blown out, but the riffs and the songwriting are great. The vocals are killer as well. Just banger after banger after banger. I will say it is one of my all-time faves, even taking into consideration, especially these days, there's only so much I can listen to it because, again, the remaster of the compression is really freaking aggressive. It's just a listen on your ears that even at a lower volume, it's going to pummel the shit out of your eardrums. So, but keep that in mind. And super influential album to punk and alternative rock in general. So Raw Power by the Stooges is a great pick. And I think for Nirvana, the sort of heaviness that albums like Nevermind brought to the table, it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense. Surfer Rosa, Pixies, not my personal favorite Pixies album, but great early record from them. It's got a lot of the Pixies bangers on there. Pretty famous album from them. It's, again, not, I think, as decked out with great tracks or as fully fleshed out as later stuff, but still a great record. We also have Breeders, POD, which, any Breeders kind of makes sense. You also notice in this list, Kurt kind of prefers and this is a very kind of 90s taste sort of thing. I don't know if this is Doolittle is really kind of above Surfer Rosa for me. I'm going to free the chat a little bit. We can kind of go crazy throwing our opinions out there. And as a child of the 90s, this is very kind of 90s, alternative taste kind of thing. I even prefer Bossa Nova over the Pixies' first record. The guitar mixes on that record are so lush and so heavy and so fun. It's a very 90s thing to always sort of trend toward, what is the first thing this band did, or one of the earliest things this band did before they sold out or something like that. It was a very 90s kind of thing to always favor the first introduction to the group, or sort of before things got maybe more widely accessible, depending on where your taste kind of lied. Pixies is bald coated, very bald coated. But Breeders, POD, this Vaseline's EP, I'm not familiar with, honestly. Yeah, before they sold out. Look, sellout discourse in the 90s was crazy, was aggressive. Like even being on like, you know, a label would sort of like, you know, not a label, but like a major label, you know, like even something like getting put onto Geffen. That was the state of 90s music discourse. Again, I don't really think I've spent too much time listening to this EP at all, if any time. Oh, this so makes sense. In fact, this is like the sound of this, the vibe of this, and again, maybe I'm getting like the progression of like influences and trends wrong, but like this is very Pixies and Breeders coded, so this kind of makes sense. And again, I'm just perusing it for 30 seconds. I feel like it's a little redundant given what else is here, but you know, it makes sense as a placement given what else is in the list so far, because this feels very much in line with the past couple of other projects that he shouted out here. Really awesome and epic and frankly commendable for Kurt to be on the Shag's Philosophy of the World wave back in the 90s. Obviously, you know, sort of like an outsider music classic today. But the thing is, like, you really needed to be sort of in tune with shit in order to, you know, be coming across recommendations like this back in the 90s. Like, you really need to be paying attention. You really needed to be sort of like looking for those weird obscurities. Very based pick of Kurt. And that is also part of the reason we're doing the stream. Was Kurt's taste based? Is Too Slimy on this list? You know, if Kurt was alive today and he was doing an update, he very much probably would have put Too Slimy on the list. He must have listened to WFMU. He probably did. He's probably listened to some WFMU. Landshark Fang. I'm not familiar with Landshark Fang. Landshark Fang. Does anybody know a Landshark Fang banger? All right, let's I don't know. Maybe let's try the title track. All right, so Kurt definitely into some like really grimy underground hardcore punk here, obviously, which is sick. Fang, Landshark. Most definitely look this if you're looking for some old school hardcore punk that's very rough around the edges. Wild recording. Look up that Landshark. Sounds like it's a blast, honestly. Another hardcore punk pick, MDC's Millions of Dead Cops, which again, it sort of seems like back to back we're going hardcore punk. Scratch Acid, which I've not listened to in years. Holy shit. And I don't even know if when I listened to them it was this first EP. Again, just the hilarious favoritism toward the first thing. The first thing, man. The first one's always the best. Let's go. Ooh, that's nasty. That hits nasty. That's some great 80s hardcore. Holy crap. That hits real nasty. That bass is sick. The band is tight as fuck. That's freaking great. Was Rate Your Music a thing when Kurt was alive? You see, Kurt was not getting these recommendations from Rate Your Music. He really needed to go out there. What is this song? This one is The Greatest Gift, I believe, if I'm correct, or maybe it's Monsters. Again, it's just like an 8-track EP. Looks to be about 21 minutes long. And again, just looks like a really sick hardcore punk EP. R.I.P. Kurt, you would have loved Geese? Maybe. We also have Saccharine Trust from their first EP. Was not familiar with that one either. But also, yes, Butthole Surfers. Based pick. Butthole Surfers. PP the Sailor. If you're looking for really scummy, scraggly, weird, I mean, you know, obviously like their Pepper era is a little bit more mainstream. I've actually a lot more mainstream than what they were doing like prior. But, you know, as far as like some of the scummiest, weirdest underground rock that you could hear in the 90s, in the 80s, like Butthole Surfers are the way. Yeah, no, I definitely wonder what music he would listen to now as well. Maybe the new Mandy, Indiana. I've been listening to that, and it's a pretty sick album. All right, next is a personal favorite of mine, Black Flag, My War, which I've always personally favored in their catalog. I think you know, for hardcore punk, the song progressions and structures are really cool. Henry Rollins' vocal performances are sick. My War is like one of their all-time best songs, period. Greg's riffs are sick as hell and, you know, not sort of like meat and potatoes like a lot of hardcore punk that, you know, kind of came before this record. It's a very dynamic album for a hardcore punk record and shows a lot of progression in in Black Flag's playing and songwriting. Rock for Light by Bad Brains is interesting though. Maybe in the 90s, you know, the debut album was already too obvious of a pick or something. It's going with the second record, but I mean, both are great albums. The first two, you can't go wrong with the first two Bad Brains records for sure. I used to have Black Dots on vinyl as well. I think I gave it up at some point, which pisses me off. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. We also have Gang of Four Entertainment. Is everybody in the chat familiar with Gang of Four Entertainment? This is like a top 10 post-punk classic that you should all be well familiar with at this point. Incredible record, incredible album, nearly a perfect album, one banger after the next, great grooves, great songwriting, incredible bass work as well. Very based pick of Kurt to work Gang of Four's Entertainment in there. Bro had taste, for sure. Ooh, we have the entry-level punk pick, though. Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, which, I mean, I feel like in the 90s didn't really have the... I think the conception that the album is like, whatever, it's so passé. I think that's more of like a recent take or view of the album. In the 90s, Nevermind the Bollocks still had a lot of credibility for sure. And it's still a super influential, game-changing, significant punk classic. Even if it's not like the most fun listen, it's still a record that's full of highlights. So, you know, you got to have it if you're a real punk. It's true. You got to have, if you care about punk music, you have to have at least heard this album a handful of times, you know? I've got it on CD. It's got to be in your collection somewhere, that's for sure. But so far, very, very good list so far. I don't know if everybody knows this next one. Probably, most likely not. I only know about this band because I heard about them through this John Waters compilation where he kind of pulled together like a bunch of, you know, quirky little music oddities that he liked. And It's Only Right and Natural is like debatably their best album. And there's a lot of cool, fun songs on there. It's very based of Kurt to pick a record like this because, again, it's like a very openly queer kind of, you know, punk project, which, again, like in the 90s, this sort of thing was like not going mainstream, like for fucking sure. And, you know, even struggled to sort of like, would have even gained, struggled to gain, you know, sort of like notoriety and validity in sort of like, you know, something as for its time as progressive as like the grunge scene, you know, or, you know, the punk scene, because, you know, still like, not all views, even in punk, were like as sort of forward thinking as they could be when, you know, it came to sort of like, queerness in some circles. So, you know, shout out to the Frogs, very, you know, ahead of the curve, sort of band. Yeah, exactly. You know, Alex Jones was, on the Frogs turning the gay wave because of this album. He heard about it here is where he first heard about it. PJ Harvey Dry, very based pick of Kurt, to pick up PJ Harvey's Dry on here as well. We're getting some more, you know, obvious picks and, you know, inclusions, but, still, you know, great pick. Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation. There are a lot of Sonic Youth records that I prefer over this one, including Sister, you know, which I love to death. But I mean, you know, as far as like 90s rock, slacker rock, you know, or, you know, obviously what we sort of like interpret as being kind of a 90s vibe in rock music, like Sonic Youth's Daydream Nation, had pretty much encapsulated it in a lot of ways, was ahead of the curve in a lot of the ways, influenced a lot of artists, had some game-changing guitar work as well, even if it wasn't as avant-garde and as noisy as a lot of their output up until this point. Really great, you know, sort of like gateway record for Sonic Youth. I just feel like the more you listen to their catalog, the more interesting some of their other albums kind of feel in comparison, but that's just like my personal opinion. Bro doesn't have any Kendrick. We're not in the third column yet. You know, you just got to wait. I think Kendrick's turning up in the third column. The next, Get the Knack, which I'm kind of surprised about. That record for some is like sort of like an entry level sort of album. The Saints, Know Your Product. I don't know this album. Australian punk band, eh? Okay. I mean, here's the song Know Your Product itself. Yo, this is cool. These guys are from Australia? I've not heard of the Saints band before. Know Your Product. That's a really cool track. The horn section is killer. Lots of swagger in the vocals. Really nice production too. Yeah, little Hives vibes. Anything by Kleenex. Okay, so Wait a second. I've looked at this this list a couple of times before. I've not noticed this. He literally he's just later saying Kleenex, anything by Kleenex, which honestly is a recommendation I stand by. I am a really big fan of any sort of like UK fem post-punk late 70s, early 80s, and Kleenex is perfectly one of those bands. They did come out with a lot of great stuff. I believe they also had to change their name at one point to Lilliput, if I remember correctly, but still, anything they recorded under the name Kleenex is fire. So I do vibe with Kurt's recommendation there. They were Swiss, really? Would Kurt like Green Day or Blink-182 more? I think he'd probably prefer early Green Day more. Also, in a similar vein, that sort of like early femme post-punk 70s, beginning of the 80s, Raincoats also fits in that that sort of vibe, and that's also an album I love. There's an amazing cover of Lola on this record as well that is incredible. Love this album to death. It's one of my post-punk faves for sure. Very much recommend this album as well. Another based pick from Kurt. Colossal Youth, Young Marble Giants. This is like more of a, I think this is like more of a twee, sort of like underground twee pop kind of release. Like a minimal sort of like underground rock release, which I'm not crazy about myself, but like it is highly influential. And I sort of like, you know, understand the appeal there. Any Cemetery. I think Cemetery, Nine Vicious, Kendrick, I think all of them are coming in the third column. You got to wait for the third column. Is there any Melvins on the list? I mean, there should be, but there's always been sort of like a lot of talk and rumors of like, you know, back in the day of like Melvins not messing with Nirvana at certain points or vice versa, which I think is mostly kind of like played up for drama, but you know, we'll just have to see if they turn up in the list. They very well may, but I don't recall off the top of my head. But yeah, you know, if you're looking for any kind of like twee popish type stuff, if I am remembering this correctly, Colossal Youth by Young Marble Giants is definitely a good way to go. Kurt, Aerosmith fan over here, really digging on this Aerosmith record. Rocks. Goddamn. I mean, we pretty much know what we're getting there in terms of like, you know, classic hard rock vibes. Punk Comp California. What is this? I don't think I've heard this compilation. Okay, there is a compilation that I'm seeing that has the Germs, has the Eyes, which are Californian punk bands, but the compilation is called What Is It? Not What Is This? But I mean, that sort of seems like the kind of thing that you would mess up if you were writing it out. But yeah, you know, if you are looking to sort of like familiarize yourself, and this is not the only release that is pointed in this direction, with some of the hardcore punk scene in the early 80s in California, which there are a lot of great bands in hardcore punk that came out of the early 80s in California. Sounds like this compilation is not a bad place to start. You got Germs, Chaos, the Dills, the Skulls, more of the Germs. It's kind of repeating a handful of different bands on side A and side B. Not the most, you know, obviously a diverse roster, but you know, still seems like 6 really solid bands making some hardcore bangers out there at the time. You know, we were talking if Kurt messed with frickin' Green Day. There is one green on here. It's REM's green, which is kind of an interesting pick. For all intents and purposes, like REM are kind of like the American answer to the Smiths. You know, it's very much an American sort of take on jangle pop, which I think is, you know, it's okay. Again, you could debate on whether or not Green is like the record to pick. But I mean, up until this point, you know, up until like Automatic for the People, the band never put out a terrible record. So, I mean, why the hell not, I guess? Holy shit. Shonen Knife is on here? Burning Farm Cassette? I wouldn't have expected so much poppy stuff on here. I mean, there's a good balance. I wouldn't say the mix of records is too poppy. We do have The Clash's Combat Rock, which we will get into sort of like that pick over there. But yeah, you know, kind of a legendary Japanese pop punk outfit that Kurt was apparently sort of like hip to. There you go. Kurt Cobain, Feminist Supreme over here. The Slits, Typical Girls, excellent record. The Slits, Typical Girls, The Slits Cut, amazing post-punk album, fantastic band, put out great bangers back in the day. But then also The Clash, Combat Rock. Again, I'll to sort of dig on this one further, this is like one of my favorite records of kind of the post-punk era. Not to gloss over it. I feel like I've said a lot about it over the years. But really great pick, really great shout out. Great album for sure. Classic as fuck. But the Clash Combat Rock, not London Calling, not the first album, Combat Rock. Kurt was rocking the Casbah. He preferred to rock the Casbah rather than ride in a new Cadillac, which I guess is fine. He was for the girlies. He liked a good jam. He liked a good pop punky and sometimes on occasion a danceable jam. He was a man of balance, a man of taste. This feels like his faves at the time more than it is an accurate topster. Okay, I sort of said that at the start of the stream, so I mean, I agree with that assessment, but let's not use the T word in this conversation. Kurt Cobain died not knowing what the fuck a topster was. Okay, he and, you know, that's one of the things I envy about Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain, he got to leave this mortal coil without knowing what the fuck a topster was, which is fine. You know, it's sometimes I think like, man, I wish I could be like Kurt Cobain so that I wouldn't have to know what the fuck a topster is. So let's not use the T word here. Okay. Let's avoid the T word when talking about Kurt Cobain's favorites. We have the Void Faith EP. Is this not like an industrial classic, if I remember correctly, or am I sort of like no, hardcore punk, straight edge? Wow. Okay. Shit. I should know. Oh, okay. It's a split. Nice. And it's a Discord record. All right. Shit. Okay. So here we have some DC hardcore, which is really nice. I mean, you can't go really wrong with any sort of like hardcore punk Discord was dropping during the early 80s. There you go there. I mean, we've had a few hardcore punk picks so far. So another one, but again, DC represent is not surprising. Really glad that Kurt Cobain played Sweden between the DC and Cali hardcore scenes at the time. He wasn't playing favorites. He enjoyed releases from both. All right. Also Rites of Spring in the mix over here. Rites of Spring. Kurt was on that early emo wave. You know, he was truly a Scrams bro. He was truly, into emo insofar as it was emotional hardcore and had no interest in it. Any of the offshoots that came from there past that point. Banger pick, classic early emo release. Incredible record. Beat Happening, also kind of like an early Twee-ish, playful, lighthearted-ish kind of post-punky record, which is really cool. Sort of in line with a few other placements in the list so far. Although I'm not familiar with Tales of Terror, Sacramento. Interesting. I've never heard of this band. Skate punk band? I'm going to try the song That Girl. There's a lot of short tracks on this thing. Well, let's give it a spin. Yow! Not too bad. I mean, it didn't blow me away as much as some of the other picks here. I might have to dig into it more later. I'll save the tab. But Tales of Terror, self-titled record that dropped in the mid-'80s. Sacramento band, but previously not familiar with Tales of Terror, honestly. Leadbelly. Kurt Cobain enjoyed some classic American folk artists. Last Sessions, Volume 1, sick. And, true to his West Coast underground rock bona fides, we got Mudhoney in the mix. Mudhoney is a very solid band, really kind of proved themselves to be like, a band's band of the West Coast scene during this time period. If you're really looking, to get more of a sense of like what the West Coast scene and Seattle scene was really all about, late 80s, early 90s, especially during, the grunge explosion, that sort of thing, you got to spin some Mudhoney. Kurt Cobain famously was a Daniel Johnston supporter. The part of Daniel Johnston's legend is tied to the fact that, Kurt had that bit of a press run where he was, constantly wearing the Daniel Johnston shirt. Bro really messed with his music. Yip Jump Music is absolutely a Daniel Johnston classic. If you are looking to get into Daniel Johnston, that Songs of Pain, pretty much, any of his like 80s cassettes are a great entry point. All right. Flipper, generic Flipper which is not personally a favorite of mine, but for many is like a noise rock classic. There are albums that, I prefer more in this style for sure. But like, as far as like weirdo underground, very noisy, chaotic 90s rock, 90s rock favorites go, Generic Flipper is, most definitely a very solid pick for sure. I'm not surprised at all that Kurt would be messing with some Generic Flipper. Another pick that has gotten a lot of debate over the years is Kurt's favoritism toward the Beatles is Meet the Beatles. Kurt, there are no, from again, my recollection, I'm pretty sure, there are no like cool, hip, boundary pushing, later era psychedelic Beatles picks in this list. Kurt's sole Beatles pick is Meet the Beatles. And when you're talking about this era of the Beatles, he didn't even pick an album that arguably has like stronger songwriting, like Help or something like that. He's like, you know what? I'm just into Meet the Beatles. I want that straightforward writing and balladry. Beat the Beatles. But yeah, Kurt favored Meet the Beatles. Okay, half Japanese. We Are Those Who Ache with Amorous Love. Again, half Japanese. Very underground, very experimental outfit, very noisy, very abrasive. If you're looking for some of the weirdest rock that was favored and beloved during this era, half Japanese is like pretty much a must, pretty much a necessary pick. We also have more Butthole Surfers in the list. Again, more cause to question, is this really Kurt's topster here, or are these just some albums he enjoyed at the time? Again, more Butthole Surfers and more weird Butthole Surfers on top of it. Locust Abortion Technician is, again, a must listen if you're looking to really familiarize yourself with the Butthole Surfers catalog. We also have Damaged Black Flag. So, not just the My War era, not just, sort of like progressive is maybe a weird term to put on it, but again, the writing and the performances on My War are much more dynamic and versatile and detailed. Damaged is much more sort of like meat and potatoes West Coast hardcore punk. And it's cool that, Kurt enjoyed that era of the band's career, even if it's not personally like, my favorite. So, and more West Coast hardcore punk classics. Fear's the Record. Fear is another kind of like West Coast hardcore punk essential. So second column done. Now we're going to go into the third column, which famously is where Kendrick Lamar and all those artists you guys were curious about earlier turn up. That all turns up in the in the third column over here. We just got to look out for it. It's coming. Flowers of what is it? Flowers. I'm not familiar with this Pill record. I know Pill. Flowers of Romance. Okay. Flowers of Romance. Sorry. Yeah. Why didn't I read Romance? Maybe the A was kind of throwing me off or something. I know their first couple of albums. I know a few like later ones, but I'm not really familiar with this record. Industrial Music Concrete. Really? Ritual Ambient on this one too? Okay, shit. Again, I know second record. I know the debut album has some cool tracks on it, but I was actually not really familiar with this one. I'll have to check this one out, even though John Lydon's a dickhead. Also, another bass pick. One of my favorites of all time is Public Enemy's Takes a Nation of Millions. Classic record, amazing record, groundbreaking record, mind-blowing production, incredible commentary in the lyrics. Just amazing album all around. Takes a Nation of Millions. Classic hip-hop album. Even if Kendrick doesn't turn up in this list, in a lot of respects, I don't think Kendrick would exist without a record like this. So, Beach Party Marine Girls. I'm not really familiar with this one. The hell kind of band is Beach Party Marine Girls? Twee pop. See, again, Kurt liked some twee pop. He preferred his pop twee. And by no surprise, especially given the title, I guess there's a bit of surf rock influence on this one. No way Kurt had this kind of ball knowledge. He did. He did genuinely have this ball knowledge. I don't know if this is the same. No, Lazy Ways Beach Party. So this combines this release with something else. I don't think I've ever heard this band before. Here we go. Let's try this. Very cool. I could see how that would be like heavily influential to, at least in sort of like a distant sense, though I wouldn't be surprised if this is like in their personal record collections, but bands like Vivian Girls, that sort of thing. Very cool stuff. Vaseline's-esque, not quite as heavy, though there may be some noisier tracks deeper into the record, but that was the song In Love. Lazy Ways and Beach Party from Marine Girls. Kurt was truly a music nerd. It is true. David Bowie, Man Who Sold the World, not really surprising, especially considering like he covered it, you know. It's kind of like he really kind of gave that song another life in the US, The Man Who Sold the World. So Kurt, David Bowie, The Man Who Sold the World is not really a surprising inclusion. Wipers, is this real? Sorry, wait, hold on. Is this okay? So we got 2 Wipers records. I've never been a big Wipers guy. As much as in my mind, I feel like I should like them, you know, given like the weird sort of like, you know, place in punk that they inhabit. But I've never been the biggest Wipers man. Okay, wait, I stand corrected. 3 Wipers records back to back. 3 Wipers records back to back. Kurt was a big Wipers man. He was wiping away. He was just wiping, man. He was wiping like crazy. Big Wipers head. I mean, I would imagine endorsing them in this way, you know, it was at least in a big way kind of contributing to their continued acclaim for sure. But definitely an influential and very cool band in their own right, even if they're not like a personal favorite of mine. Next, is this where Kendrick Lamar turns up? I think Kendrick Lamar turns up next. Oh no, Mazzy Star. Okay. Dream Pop Classic. Dream Pop Classic. One of the most game-changing, ahead of the curve bands on the dream pop circuit of all time. Mazzy Star is a total necessity. And then Kurt Cobain messed with some Swans as well, which another bass pick. Swans, personal favorite of mine too. So there you go. What is R-ing a Slave though? That's the title of the release. It's a song they had. It comes from the earlier era of the band's career where there were some very sort of like tortured, dark, super edgy, effed up lyrics and commentary going on. No Devo. I'm not really surprised by Kurt Cobain not listing a Devo album, though. His music doesn't give me Devo energy. And, you know, from a lot of this list, from like what we could see, Kurt Cobain very clearly a kind of guy whose influences, whose preferences, it came out in his music. There are some artists that talk about their favorite albums of all time and, you know, they ride for certain artists and they ride for certain records. And you're like, I can't believe you like that album. Your music doesn't sound anything like that. You don't strike me as the kind of artist who would like that, given what I know your music to sound like. But I mean, given this list, like Kurt was very influenced by stuff that he liked. And, you know, even though we, you know, a lot of the media kind of views grunge and views Kurt and views Nirvana as in like, you know, a vacuum musically and artistically, none of this stuff came out of nowhere, you know? There's a progression artistically to, you know, the sounds and artists that inspired the grunge movement in America. And I feel like if anything, this list kind of like lays that out. If I'm surprised by anything with this list, it's that there's no Killing Joke on the list, considering like, you know, Kurt got dinged for essentially like, you know, borrowing a riff from, what is that song? 80s. We're living in the 80s. Like that Killing Joke song, Kurt pretty much ripped off the guitar lick from that song. So I've got to surprise there's no Killing Joke on the list. Killing Joke took that from the Damned. I mean, still it's a borrowed thing. There's not even any Damned on the list. There's no Damned either. No Wire, no Mission of Burma. I am kind of surprised by no Mission of Burma. Mission of Burma seems like the kind of band that Kurt would mess with. And I know that bands like, you know, Sonic Youth were like well aware of Mission of Burma at the time. But, you know, maybe he wasn't that big of a Mission of Burma head. No Stevie Wonder. I don't know if, again, given Kurt's songwriting, I don't know how big of a Stevie Wonder guy he would like be, you know? No Big Black. I guess that's surprising. Beach Boys would have been cool to see mentioned. No, that's true. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video, this stream over here, guys. Thank you very much for going over the Cobain 50 with me. Some good picks in here. Sadly, no Melvins either. No Melvins in the mix, but it just kind of is what it is.